I'm David, I'm an alcoholic. Why couldn't you have gotten that on tape? I'd like to have that. That was awesome. Did I say I'm David, I'm an alcoholic? I'm a little nervous. I mean, I've done this before. It's not like it's my first time, but I got to tell you, when you're getting up and doing it in front of your home group, it's a little bit different feeling. And this is my home group now, and I'm very proud to say that. Somebody told me the first time I ever did this, I think the first time I ever spoke, maybe a couple of years sober, I was down in Aberdeen, and some guy told me, he said, you know, it's probably good that you get a little nervous. That's God shaking the BS out of you. So hopefully you guys will get the truth tonight. I'll do the best I can. My sobriety date is October the 23rd of 1997. And that's a miracle right there that I've gone that long without finding it necessary to drink. And I'll tell you, if anybody had told me that when I got up that Thursday morning, how my life was going to play out from that point on, I probably would not have believed it. But I'll back up and work my way back forward to that point to tell you how I got myself in that predicament. Just give you a little bit of a scenario of what my life was like before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous in sort of a general way. I grew up in Aberdeen, so I'm as close to a Moore County native as you can get. My family's from Robinson County, and I'm the oldest. I have one sister who's 2 years younger than me. And I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way, and she knows this. She's heard this deal before. I had a lot of resentments toward her growing up because she was smarter and she was more talented, and she never got in trouble, and I always got in trouble. So that was one of my resentments growing up, and I just had to get used. I had to get used to that at an early age. I used to tell people, I said I had relatively 2 good years, and then my sister was born. So, but I love her, and there's some. She comes into my story a little bit later on. Hopefully, I'll get to that. But anyway, so as I said, it was just me and my sister, family in Aberdeen. My dad had a job with what was in Carolina Power and Light. My mom was a music teacher, private piano teaches. She still does teaches piano lessons at home, and she's a church organist. And matter of fact, I spent most of my growing up years in this church. Not this particular facility. This wasn't here when I was there, but I was dumped in the old white framed sanctuary. That building's not there anymore, but that's where I was baptized and went to church here. And some of my friends used to say the thing that looks like a rocket launch pad. That's where I went to church for many, many years. Also where I got another resentment, because with Mom being the church organist and being involved in this church, I was made to go to church. And as I got on in years, I didn't really like that. And she also, as I said, she was a music person, so she directed the youth choirs here, the junior and youth choirs. So I was made to do that, even though I didn't really want to. As I said, I got in trouble a lot, and I think something that's very telling in my story, and this hit me the other day. I can't believe I'd never thought of this before, but when I was in junior choir, we did this musical, and it was called The Rebel. And you want to guess who was the star of the play? I was the rebel. And my dad used to tease me and say that was typecasting if there ever was. And he should know. I got in trouble a lot because I'm the type of person that, you know, Dad told me not to do something, and I was going to go ahead and do it anyway. And I'm probably the only person. I can't remember if this was junior choir or it may have been in youth choir. Mom was the director, and I'm probably the only person with a distinction who got thrown out of choir practice by his own mom. So I'm just telling you, that's just the way I was growing up, and I'm sure I was no fun at times for my parents. But you know, I thought, you know, all those years coming along, everything seemed pretty normal to me. You know, I do look back on it, and as I said, you know, getting in trouble a lot. I learned the value of lying, and I did that a lot to try to get out of trouble. And I can see where that served me well coming along as in my later years in alcoholism. That was one of those character defects. And it became almost easier to tell a lie than to tell the truth sometimes to avoid getting in trouble. And I was also the type of kid, I wanted to be accepted by the kids in the neighborhood, and so I could get talked into doing stuff. And I did a lot of stupid stuff growing up. I got talked into one time shoplifting a pack of cigarettes at the Winn-Dixie up the shopping center where I live. And it turned out that the manager of that store, his wife was my second grade teacher. So rather than call the police, they did something even worse. They called my dad, and I got into quite a bit of trouble for that. But I think probably the most telling thing, some of you've probably heard me say this before, but it's pretty bad when you get talked into shoplifting at the Christian bookstore. And, and I did. And the people that owned the Christian bookstore went to church here. And so once again, rather than law enforcement intervention, I got the dad intervention again, which probably they'd call the police. But anyway, that was just the way it was. That's just a couple of examples of the extremes I would go to get accepted. And so that was the way it was. By the time I got to high school, I was already kind of having these feelings of sort of not fitting in with the crowd that I thought I should be a part of. And so again, I learned ways of doing things to get involved and to win their approval and to be included in their group. And I got I guess about my junior year in high school, I started to develop an interest in journalism and photography. So I got involved with the student newspaper and also doing a little photography for the school annual. And one of the things that I learned real quickly, especially with doing the work for the school annual and bringing the camera to school, is that instantly made me very popular with everybody, because everybody wanted to have their pictures taken and they wanted it to be in the annual. So some days I would come to school with that camera and there wouldn't be a stitch of film in it, and I would be snapping people's pictures right and left, because it made me popular. And anyway, I had fun with that, and I got a little part-time job. There was a newspaper in Aberdeen that's not there now. It's not. It went out of business years ago, the Sand Hill Citizen. I got a little part-time job as a sports reporter covering Pinecrest, which is where I went to school. And so my high school turned out to be a lot of fun. And my junior and senior year, I kind of got in with the party crowd, which is that was important to me. And unfortunately, by the time I got to my senior year, a lot of my friends, had started years before preparing to go to college. And so it hit me about the beginning of my senior year that I hadn't really done that. And so needless to say, a lot of my friends went off after we graduated from high school, they went on off to college. And I wound up staying here and going to Sand Hills for a couple of years. But again, it was probably a good thing. I had a couple of good years out there and got my grades up and got accepted to a 4-year school, and which was exciting. And my drinking was not an issue. You haven't heard me talk about drinking a lot because it really wasn't an issue at that point. At least I didn't think it was. I would drink on weekends, and I would party with my friends, but that was pretty much confined to weekends, and I didn't see it as really having that big of a problem for me in my life. I do have to back up. There's one thing that I have to share about the consequences of drinking at an early age. Some of you that have been around here for a while probably remember the old Stony Brook horse races over here at off Young's Road, and I had gone out there one year, and my job was to cover that event, and I wound up getting pretty drunk that day. I had to give my camera to a friend of mine, and then went and passed out in my car, and when I came to, I was the only person there. Everybody was gone, except for a sheriff's deputy. And so I was asked to leave the property, and that would be bad enough, but the second part of the deal was I was supposed to be over here at the church at 5 o'clock to play my trumpet in a brass quartet. And I don't know if you can imagine what it would be like trying to play trumpet when you're drunk, but it doesn't work. And I'm here to tell you it's even worse the next morning when you're hungover, as I found out that next day, if you can imagine trying to play a trumpet with a hangover. So, but again, I didn't see that as any kind of negative consequences of my drinking. But anyway, when I got out of here, when I finally got on my own and got up to college, I was rooming with a guy, with three other guys. One of them was a guy that grew up across the street from me, and was a pretty smart guy. He was graduated fourth in our class, and he was a nuclear engineering major. He was a smart guy, and he was a marijuana dealer. So, and I won't talk a lot about that substance, but that substance was around a lot when I was up there for my time at school, but I found though that I could take or leave that, but up there, I started drinking more. And the thing that I found with that was I couldn't really leave that alone once I got started. Once I started drinking, I was going to go until I was done. And for me, when I say done, that usually means when I'm passed out. Because I can't really ever remember a time from that point forward where I ever stopped drinking on my own. But I didn't see that as much of a problem. When I was up there on my own, and I had a great time. I did find out though that when you're in an institution like that, they kind of expect you. You're paying good money to be there, so they expect you to be in class, and they're not very happy with you when you quit going to class, which is basically what I did by my second semester. So I got a letter that spring not inviting me back. So anyway, I was faced with that prospect of not being able to go back. And I was going to have to come back home and live with Mom and Dad again. And after being up there for a year, I wasn't excited about that prospect, but that's what happened. And again, I didn't see that as any kind of a consequence of my drinking. That was just, that wasn't right for me, so I'll have to find something else. And so I did kind of land on my feet that summer and got a job, and eventually, after about 6 months, I was able to get back out on my own, and I did all right. Again, the drinking was confined to weekends, but as looking back on it, being that I am an alcoholic, that the drinking started stretching into the week. Started getting into weeknights, Wednesday night, and then I'd have a reason to drink on Monday night, and then pretty much I was drinking every day. And I was able to do that for a good long time, where it really wasn't causing me any problems. And but eventually it did, and I started to get in trouble in the job that I was in, and I wound up changing jobs. I got out of that line of work and went into another line of work, which allowed me to work out of my home. And for an alcoholic, that's heaven, because I didn't have to worry about getting up and going to work every day. I had to worry about getting up. So if I could get out of bed and go to my den, I was at work. And so that was a nice setup for me for a long time. And I wound up in a somewhat unhealthy relationship, and decided after seeing one of my best friends get married, I thought, what the heck, I think I'll get married too. And I found someone who was just crazy enough to marry me, and we got married. And so as you can imagine, the way I describe that's probably not a healthy way to go into a marriage. And needless to say, when that happened, when I hit that point and I realized I was in way over my head, because I didn't know what I'd gotten myself into. I'd married someone that had a couple of older kids from a previous marriage, and that was when the drinking really rocketed. And it was starting to become a problem again with work. I had gotten involved in her church, and I know some of this is probably ego on my part, but I got myself into elected leadership position in that church, and I was starting to have problems. I was starting to fall down on the job there. I was falling down on the job at work, and I certainly wasn't being much of a husband. And it eventually hit a point after a particularly bad night in February of '96 when I got into an argument with the wood stove, trying to jam a log in there that wasn't going to fit. and she was telling me, you can't, that's not going to work, and I was going to prove her wrong, and I was pretty much in a blackout. And it's a miracle I didn't burn the house down. But anyway, the next morning I woke up on the couch downstairs, which is not a good sign right there. And then I got a look that morning that I'd never seen before, and I was given an ultimatum that probably no alcoholic likes to hear, which is you need to get help or get out. And I had no clue at that point what I was going to do, and I certainly wasn't going to admit to anybody at that point that I had a problem with alcohol. I thought maybe I was just kind of overloaded with everything that was going on with my job and the marriage that was falling apart and all this other, any other thing I could think of, but not alcohol. And she said, well, I don't care. She said, whatever, you need to go somewhere and you need to get help. And so I said, will you drive me over to the hospital? And we lived right behind the hospital. And she started to tell me, no, you can just walk. And then I think she had a moment of compassion, so she drove me over to the hospital and dropped me off. And so I went into the emergency room, and this is like, I'm pretty sure this is a God thing, because the person that intervened with me when I got there that morning happened to be somebody that I now know was in the program, Wayne Morton, and he was the intake nurse, I guess, in the emergency room that morning. So they took me in and did all this, all the testing, took blood and all this other stuff, and then Wayne came and told me, you need to be in detox. And I said, detox? He said, yeah, you need to be in detox. And I said, I really would like to go to the psych ward. And because I thought that would be better than psych ward sounded like a vacation to me. I thought if I could go down there for 30 days and get away from the world, that I would be fine. And so Wayne told me a really good story, which is he later told me was pure fabrication. He said, well, I'll tell you what, there's no beds down there in psych ward right now, but we get you up in detox, you've got a better shot of getting to bed when it opens up down in the psych ward. So I believed him, and I let him haul me up to the psych ward. And I'm still in denial about having any kind of a problem with alcohol. And even though here I am now, I'm in detox. And my wife has called everybody on the face of the planet, my mom, my boss, my pastor, her parents, anybody else she could think of, to tell them, what a mean SOB I am, and that she wasn't sugarcoating anything. So there I am in detox at the hospital, and that Monday night, they usually used to take the treatment center up there. They used to have a 28-day treatment program there, and they would take the patients out to meetings. And but we'd had an ice storm that week or that weekend, so they couldn't take the bus out. So they decided to have an ad hoc AA meeting there that Monday night there at the treatment center. And the nurse and the detox suggested to all of us that were down there that maybe we should go try this meeting. And so I didn't really feel like I had a choice, so I had to go. And I really do not remember anything about that meeting. I just know I sat there at the back of the room, and then when they got to the end, they did chips. And the person that was doing chips that night, when they offered the white chip, they didn't even ask me if I wanted one. The guy brought it to me and said, "Here, you look like you need this." And boy, I'll tell you, that was a boiling resentment right there on my part. I mean, I wasn't even given a choice on my very first white chip. And so I got through the 5 days in detox, and luckily the company I was working for, I had good insurance, and they told me I could, if I wanted to do the 28-day inpatient, I could do that, or I could do the intensive outpatient. And my rather bizarre way of thinking had me convinced that there was no way the world could get along without me in it for 30 days. So I decided to go for the outpatient so that I could be at home. And I would come back 4 days a week for whatever it was, 4 hours an afternoon on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, I think is the way it was. And so I got signed up. I got signed up for intensive outpatient. I got out of the hospital that Friday, and I'll never forget this. I remember this like it happened yesterday. This alcoholic mind of mine. So my wife picks me up. We go to Applebee's to have lunch. And this couple from our church was in the bar having dinner, and he had a draft beer, and he didn't finish it. And that bothered me the whole time we were sitting there, that man never finished that draft beer. But I didn't have a problem with alcohol. But I remember that, and I now know I still had a pretty good alcoholic mind at the time that I could remember that. But anyway, he left that beer, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. So that next Monday, I started my outpatient treatment for alcoholism, and I was going to learn all about alcoholism. And I got in there, and Nancy Patton King, whom I've come to love, was the counselor, and she's one of us. But I came to refer to her after that first week as the AA Nazi, because she made it clear to me that I was going to an AA meeting. As bad as I did not want to go to an AA meeting, she said, you have to go to AA. So, I figure, all right, well, I don't want to go to an AA meeting around here because in my mind, too many people knew me. So I decided to go up to Vass. Nobody up there will know who I am. Half of Pinehurst was up there. So I thought, and some of you know Jack L. Jack and I knew each other from our drinking days, and I guess he had gotten in here a little bit before I did. So Jack saw me as soon as I walked in, and he knew my line of work. And he immediately became concerned and approached me back there at that door and said, "Now I got to tell you, this is a closed meeting of AA. So are you here? Are you here for yourself, or are you here? If you're here doing a story, you can't stay." And so I told him, "No, I'm not here working. I'm here because I've been told I've got to come to an AA meeting." So I sat down in the back of the room, and the only thing I don't remember a whole lot about that night either, really, but the thing that struck me was there was a lot of laughing that night. I heard people having fun, and that kind of went against what I thought AA was, because at that point I kind of thought AA was just a place where you came to sit around and whine about not being able to drink. That's what I had in my mind, and that wasn't what I heard that night. And I knew a couple of other people that from back in the day that were in that room that night too, which is so I started feeling a little bit more comfortable, so I went back again, and then I started trying a couple of meetings around here, and pretty much before I was done with the outpatient treatment that April, I was probably going to meetings maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And, of course, I now know, for somebody new in sobriety, that's probably not enough. But I thought that was fine for me. And so that's what I was doing. And so my AA Nazi also told me that I had to have a home group, and she told me I had to have a sponsor. And so she had given me the names of a couple of people that she knew in this area that had long-term sobriety. I hate Tom isn't here because he's part of this story, because Tom was one of the names I was given. Tom, and then Mac B, some of you know from way back. And so she said, she said, find one of those 2 guys, and you don't necessarily have to ask them to sponsor you, but they might know somebody that could, because they're tied in with AA down here. So by that time, I was going to what would eventually become my first home group, the Big Book group. This group didn't exist in 1996. So Tom was a member of the Big Book group at the time, and I'll never forget, we were coming out of the Big Book study one night, and you get this scene in your mind about the Cowardly Lion approaching the wizard and the Wizard of Oz, and I come up behind Tom, real sheepishly in the hall going, "Tom, will you sponsor me?" and he turned around, he was really nice, and he said, I've got a full load, I can't really take anybody on, but I've got some guys I sponsor, maybe I'll talk to one of them and I'll hook you up. And sure enough, the next week, Tom did. He hooked me up with a guy named Wayne, and his wife Julie was both of them were in the program, and they went to the Big Book group. And Wayne lived out near where I did, and he described himself as a Big Book thumper. And Wayne said, "I'm going to come to your house every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, have a pot of coffee on, and we're going to sit down and we're going to do the Big Book. We're going to go through the Big Book." And so I started doing that. And, I give that guy a lot of credit, because every Saturday morning he was at my house at 9 o'clock. We had coffee and we did Big Book work. And but somewhere around the early part of that summer, he had to go back to Chicago. And so I was in the market again for another sponsor. So I went back to Tom and I said, any ideas? And he said, let me give me till next week. And so next week, come back. Sure enough, he says, I've got somebody I want you to try out. It was Dick Starner, who ended up being my sponsor until he passed away a year ago, March. And I immediately, I didn't know what in the world Tom was thinking, because Dick was this older guy, and I didn't think I had anything in common with him. Wayne was closer to my age. And I said, why is he hooking me up with this old guy? I don't have anything in common with him. But okay, I said, I'll give it a try. But even though I was going through the motions, I'm going to meetings and stuff, I got to say, I really wasn't doing the program. I mean, I was going to meetings and everything, and I could parrot back stuff that I would hear people say and read in meetings and everything, but I really wasn't doing the program. And so, as you can imagine, things were really not getting any better at home, in the home life and the marriage, and it finally hit a point where she said, it's obvious that you're not getting any better, and I think she was ready to throw the towel in on the marriage, and so that all came apart that summer. And so I had a lot of resentments build up, and I quit going to meetings. I got aggravated with Dick because he kept thinking, you need to go back to the beginner's meeting, and I thought I was more advanced than that I could go to the big book study. So I had all these resentments. I mean, any excuse you could think of, I was building up this bank of excuses, and so eventually I went out in an explosion of resentments that August of '96, and I finally got out of the marriage and got separated before the end of that year. And I really thought my problems are solved now, because I'm out of this marriage, and I could drink when I wanted, because I'd gotten to the point where I was hiding it at home. And for an alcoholic, that's really not fun, hiding alcohol and hiding drinks, because what's the point? I just want to get drunk and enjoy it. That's normal. So when I got out on my own, that was exactly what I did. And but the sad fact is, after a few months of that, my drinking basically took on rather sick proportions. I mean, I was probably going a pint to a fifth a night, and that's consuming a lot of alcohol. But for the longest time, I had myself convinced that was normal. I was an adult. I had a job. I did my job during the day. It's perfectly normal to have a few drinks at night. And the problem was, when I say a couple of drinks, the glasses were like that big, So that was. I mean, I was putting it away, and eventually the facade that I'd built up again had started to crack, and it was starting to become apparent to people that something was wrong with me, and I still wasn't going to admit that I had a problem with alcohol. But the pastors at the church I was going to knew that I had gone through treatment the year before, and so that summer of '97, they were really getting a little irritated with me, because I was the president of the congregation council at the church, and we were in a building campaign, and I had certain responsibilities that I was expected to do in that job, and I was starting to fall down on it. And they were concerned for me, but they were also concerned they had to be concerned about the congregation. So finally, by that October, they'd had enough, and they did something that I credit every year around my anniversary time. I always call those two pastors and thank them, because they did something that second Monday night in October that basically saved my life. They called me in their office after a council meeting that night and said, "We think you got a problem, and we think we know what it is. We want you to get help." And I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to get help. I didn't think that, I made a million excuses about what was wrong, and I said that I wasn't drinking, and they knew they knew I was lying. And so it was not a real happy ending to that meeting that night, but I went home, and Pastor Scott, who was the associate pastor, was following behind me, and he told me later, he said, I knew you were headed on to probably pull a big old drunk that night. And I said, "You're absolutely right." And so I went on. I managed on for about another week and a half or so. And somewhere in there, though, it really was starting to become, I was starting to realize that maybe the way I'm drinking is not normal. when I'm drinking Aristocrat, I'm doing shots of Aristocrat vodka and chasing it with Budweiser. I don't know if you guys have ever had Aristocrat vodka, but that stuff's nasty. And I haven't drank in 16 years, and I still remember what it tastes like. And there was nothing pleasant about it when I look back on it. It was just, it was sick. That was where I had gotten to. By that point, I was totally removed. This guy that wanted to be the life of the party and the center of attention, by that point, I was totally by myself, totally isolated. A rather pitiful existence. It was me, and I did get custody of the yellow lab when my wife and I got divorced. So I did have my yellow lab, Gabriel. And anyway, on Thursday, October the 23rd of 1997, I had a building committee meeting that night at church, and by that point, I was leaving meetings early too at church, because you know what they do. They circle up and say the Lord's Prayer after meetings, and I didn't want people feeling my hands shake. So again, that Thursday night, I made some excuse about something work-related. I had to leave the meeting early, and I went home. I was living down here living just a few blocks from here, as a matter of fact, on May Street. And so walked in that night, walked into my apartment that night, and stood there in the kitchen, and I don't know why it was that night. I can't tell you what it was, but something snapped. And so I'm standing there in the kitchen. The yellow lab, Gabriel, comes in, his tail's wagging, all happy to see me, and I'm standing there frozen like a statue. And even the dog knew something was wrong. And so I went and sat down, and this stuff was just going through my mind about what am I doing? You can't keep doing this. And I felt bad too. And I found out later I was doing some damage to my body physically from all the alcohol that I was consuming. And that night, and how I knew this was there, I don't know this. I think this is a God thing. But when I had left AA in August of 2006, I ditched a bunch of my literature and books and stuff. But I held on to my big book. And I went in the closet that night. And I knew where that big book was. And I pulled that big book out, and I sat there in the chair in my living room. I was sitting there holding that book. Now, I didn't open it and read it. I was sitting there holding the book. And I guess maybe deep down inside, I kind of knew maybe the solution to my problem was there. And so I didn't go back to AA the next night, which was probably not smart. I white-knuckled it for a little while. But that Saturday morning, I went to a men's breakfast at my church. And my pastors knew something was wrong right away because I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd never been anywhere at 8 o'clock in the morning that last year I was drinking. So they asked me, what's wrong? And I said, well, I need to talk to you guys after the thing was over. And so I went back to their office, and they were the first two people that I told. I said, you guys were absolutely right about me. I said I had started back drinking, and it was really bad. And I know I need to go back and get help. And I don't know what I was afraid of. I was a little afraid about coming back to AA because I was afraid y'all would scold me when I came back. And I realize now that's not the way it works. That's why I thought I'd be ridiculed and people would be sort of talking under their breath. Again, that's my ego and being the center of attention that everybody's going to know when I come back. And I really know that's not the way it is. But I managed to white knuckle it for about a week. And I finally got out to the hospital, to the beginners meeting out there in the old conference room. The building's not even there anymore. But I went in that night, and there were some recognizable figures sitting there on the back row. Old John was back there, and Anthony and Bill, and I think Chuck was there too that night. And there were some other people that I remembered from my short time before. And so anyway, when the white chip came up that night, I literally sprinted to get the thing. I mean, it was what a difference. And I wanted it. I mean, I was so ready for the pain and misery that I was in. I was so ready for that to be over, and I wanted something different. And when I went and picked up that white chip that night, it was I can't even tell you what a feeling that was. Well, some of you probably do know what a feeling that was. I went home that night, and for the first time in a long, long time, I actually felt a little hope. I didn't have any before that. And, I knew this time it was, I knew that I wanted this. And so I was going to be a little bit more willing to listen to things and listen to suggestions. And I was going to meetings every night. My job did have me out some nights working, but nights that I was not working, I was at meetings. And those meetings to me were little oases. If I could got to the next day, I knew if I could get through that day without drinking, I'd get to a meeting that night. And that's what those meetings became to me for the longest time. And I didn't settle on a home group right away, and I kind of let the meetings sort of carry me for a while. But I knew somewhere down the line, because I kept hearing people say you need to get a home group and you need to get a sponsor. And I was really torn about what to do, because of course this group which was not in existence before, and I was coming to this group pretty regularly on Monday and Thursday night. I had not gone back over to the Big Book group right away, which was on Tuesday night. And so finally one night I was really kind of struggling with figuring out what to do. So I called Tom, because I knew Tom's last name. As far as looking somebody up in the phone book, and I knew his last name, so I'm gonna call Tom and I said, is it possible for a person to have two home groups? And as many of you who know Tom well will know, won't be surprised, he didn't tell me no. He just said, for me, I think it's important for a person to have one home group that they're accountable to, and the group's sort of accountable to them, and you're there every week, you make that commitment, that's just important. So that kind of, at the time, the way my life was structured and the way my schedule was, that wasn't really, I would run into more conflicts with the Monday, Thursday, so I realized that maybe I was being led to go back over to Big Book, and so I did, and I showed up over there on a speaker meeting one night. Back then it was in that moldy old basement in under the chapel. That building's not there anymore. And of course there were a number of people that I remembered from my time before, including Dick, and they all, people came up and hugged me and welcomed me back, so they were glad to see me. And after the meeting was over, I went up to Dick. He was walking out. I was trying to get my nerve up to ask him if he would consider trying, if we could start the deal over again, if we could try it again. And without hesitation, he said absolutely. He said he'd be my sponsor, and that we would just start over and we'd start from scratch, and that's exactly what we did. And we started working the steps together, and I knew this time too, if I was to have any kind of chance of making it, I was going to have to get to 4 and 5. I didn't get to 4 and 5 when I had my first run here in the program, and so Dick laid it out for me and told me, we're going to do it just like it's laid out in the Big Book. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to do it that way, and that's exactly what I did. And God love him, because he knows I'm a procrastinator. So once I kind of got done with that 4th step, and I was ready to go over it with Dick, he just up and announced to me, I'm coming to your house on Sunday afternoon, and you're doing your 5th step. And that was probably a good thing, because I would have probably tried to put that off. And so he came to my house that Sunday afternoon, and it's something, again, it's one of those moments I won't ever forget. And I did my 5th step with him, and he shared some of his stuff with me as well, which kind of put me at ease. And the thing that was really important about that was the first time that I can really remember as an adult where I'd established a real deep level of trust with another human being, and that happened that afternoon between he and I. And that bond continued until the day he died. And I can understand now when people say when you do that 5th step, you really do feel a part of, and that's exactly the way it was for me. And it felt good. It felt good to share all that stuff with somebody else, and to know that I didn't have to do, I don't want to forget some of the things that happened, but it's not one of those things that I have to keep churning up and sharing with people. I shared it with him, I did it, and we moved on. We moved right on to 6 and 7, and eventually I was fortunate enough to start into 8 and 9, and anybody that's been around the program long enough knows when you have those opportunities then to start repairing the damage. And I've had some opportunities. I have had opportunities to do that and work in step 9, and then it's an amazing feeling. I've been very lucky in making some of the amends and getting a chance to go back and fix some of the damage. Some of the things I could never fix, obviously, but to go back and one of them, it ended up with my ex-wife in making amends to her, and we actually wound up becoming pretty good friends after that, which is I was able to let go of a lot of hate, a lot of anger, and stuff that had been built up that was eating me up alive, and I knew I couldn't allow that to continue sober. So that's just one example of the gifts of working those steps. But as my journey continued on, I kind of reached a point where it's no longer I felt like I had to be here. Somewhere along the line, I found myself wanting to be here and wanting to be at AA meetings, and that's a good feeling. And I had benefit of seeing the miracle happen for other people by coming to meetings and being around people, and that's been for me one of the greatest gifts is watching that miracle happen for other people. And Steve mentioned something too that's very important, and that is this doing some service work and carrying the message, and that's a big part of why I'm in this home group. And I had those opportunities early in sobriety, and I did. I don't want to make it out like I didn't do service work or carry the message, but I know, and that 12th step tells me that I'm never done. I'm never done. Practice these principles in all our fare and carry the message. And so, early on in sobriety, when I had those opportunities, I relished them. And then I kind of got away from that for a period of time. And in the last year or so, and Steve invited me to go down one time with a group of fellows to Samaritan Colony, and it was an incredible experience. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And, I got a chance to connect with some of the fellows down there, and I got to meet Harold, who's a wonderful guy. And, I've gotten more out of that. And again, it's kind of cool, and I hope Tripp doesn't mind me saying this. I'm going to say it anyway, but, when he went down the first time, when he went down the first time to the colony, and I was in that group that went down, and after we got done, he was fired up. He was fired up about it. It was a good experience, and I knew exactly. That's the way it was for me. It fires you up, and you want to do more, And I have had a couple of opportunities, like Steve said, to go and do detox. I haven't exactly had the best luck in that regard. I think I had a tobacco addict one time, and then the next time we had Lucifer. But others have had some live wires in there, and I know I'll get my chance at some point where somebody will ask me an AA question. But it helps me because I'm there doing service work. I shouldn't make light of it, but I'm there sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and hopefully somebody will benefit from that. But I just have found that kind of thing just makes my sobriety so much better. And when I was early in sobriety, one of the things that I really craved was some peace and serenity, because I didn't have that. And I have certainly found that along the way, on my journey here in AA. And in this past year, having those service opportunities has been pretty incredible. And this past year, I look back on it on balance has been pretty awesome. And the one thing I want to share, and I don't want to dwell on this too much, but that the year before, as some of you know, was a rather hard year, because I was talking about my sponsor. He passed away in my first sponsor. That is, he passed away in a year ago, March, and I happened to I got to go see Dick in the hospital. The matter of fact, the Saturday that Marilyn called me and told me they'd taken Dick to the hospital. He'd had heart problems and was not doing well, and said he had to go into the hospital. And he had a defib implanted in him that had to shock his heart back like 19 times on the way to the hospital. So that tells you it it wasn't a good situation. She called me that Saturday afternoon, and I had just gotten back from visiting my own dad, who was in the hospital rehabbing from a broken hip, a cracked hip that came on the heels of having back surgery. So he was having his own ordeal. So she called me and told me that it didn't look good. And so I went back over, and I got a chance to see him, that Saturday, because when I went back Sunday, he was pretty well, he was slipping. And I got to be over there Monday night with Marilyn right before he passed away, and that was an absolute blessing, because he was so important to me. And about 2 months later, though, then my dad passed away, and that was hard, because within less than 2 months, the two of the most important men in my life were gone. And for the first time, and I've heard people talk about this, but this was the first time that I really got to experience this, about how AA will come up around somebody and just love you and support you when you're going through something like that. And I can honestly say, going through those 2 months, especially with losing my dad, that I would have never gotten through that without this program. And it wasn't a matter of wanting to drink. That's not it. But I could have never gotten through that alone. And I remember something that Thursday morning at my mom's house. My mom and my sister and I were sitting there. It was just the whole day was surreal. But the pastor from their church came and was talking with us and said, please understand that you will not walk this path alone. And boy, there was some AA in that. And that turned out to be the truth, and I knew that I wasn't walking that path alone. I got a text message every day from a friend of mine telling me to keep the faith, which was just good reinforcement to me that I was not alone. And the outpouring I got from this program was amazing. And what I wanted to share, the reason I wanted to share that was at the visitation before the funeral, there was an AA presence there like I'd never seen before. My mom and my sister were absolutely blown away, because they were trying to figure out who all these people were that they couldn't fit in categories. And they said, "Oh, they're probably AA." And there were a lot of AA people there. There was a huge AA presence there, and again, that really brought home to me the power of this program. And I don't think for a second, if a card goes around and you sign it, that what you say, it doesn't matter what you say as long as you sign it, it's important. And I went through a really dark period there, a week or so after all that, and I pulled some cards out, because this was one of the groups that sent me cards, and I just started reading some of the things that people wrote, and it was Niagara Falls. I mean, it was just the water came. It was just, I couldn't get over some of the people. I mean, people that I knew, some people that I didn't think really liked me, and they wrote these beautiful things. And it just, the power of the program was revealed, and out of just some of the deepest most gut-wrenching pain that I've ever had to experience, out of that came probably the deepest gratitude I had ever felt for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was just powerful. Words are inadequate to describe that, and I just, that's something I'm never ever going to forget, and that's what this program does for people. I've been involved, and I've had a lot of gratitude for things that have happened along the way, but that was a whole nother level for me. And I think that's probably reinforced my desire, and especially in this past year, with the opportunities to be involved and to do service work, and it's just made everything so much better. And that peace and serenity that I want, I have that now. And my program's not perfect. I'll still mess things up, but I have a mechanism now that I can adjust that. I can plug back into the power and come back in. I've got a program that'll help me stay on track as long as I'm willing to do it. And I think about that Friday night, when I went and picked up that white chip. There was a flicker of hope that was lit that night. And the only way I can describe it is now that has erupted into a pretty good sized bonfire. And for me, I want to keep that going, and it's pretty simple. The only way you keep the fire going is you got to put logs on it. And it's the same way with my program, my AA program. I have to continue to feed it. it's at my core. It's a living and breathing entity, and I have to keep that thing. I have to keep it going. I have to feed it, and because if it dies, I know I will too, and I don't want that to happen. And I know what I have to do to continue to do that, and to keep my program going. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this group now. I don't mean anything disparaging about my old home group. My foundation was built over there, and I have a young man that I'm sponsoring now, as a matter of fact, who had to start back over this summer, and he and I are going back through the steps together, and that's a blessing right there too, because I'm sort of working these steps with him, so I'm kind of going back and doing it again myself, which is just a great way of keeping it fresh. So this program just keeps on giving gifts to me, and I want to do everything I can to give back any way I possibly can. Including doing this, even though it still scares me. But I get a lot out of it, and it helps me remember, which is important. But I have a lot of gratitude for this program and what people have done for me, and I appreciate you guys listening. Thanks.